Now, speaking of supporting the podcast, I also wanted to give a quick thank you to A. Burke Designs, who gave us our first Apple review last season, which was 5 stars. And I quote, "Great series so far. Can't believe you almost missed out on the magic of these books. Never too late to make it right." I'm going to start sharing reviews on the show as I get them. I've got a few to catch up on from last season, but I definitely love more. So please go leave some. Let's get into the next segment, which is
Lumos.
Lumos is our new segment, which is similar to the scouting report last season. Our wands are lit, and it's time to illuminate the only thing we possibly can in this awful chapter of the book, Harry Potter. This kid has been abused for his entire life at the hands of his aunt and uncle. He's been bullied by his cousin. He finally had some good news last year when he found out he was a famous wizard with a whole lot of cash, but the trade-off is that there's a dark wizard serial killer after you. So he escapes a lifetime of abuse for a few months of near-death experiences. And somehow, those are preferred. Look, he's had it rough. And what's worse is the only thing he's truly had is the friendship bond he made with Ron and Hermione at school last year. And here he is, on his birthday, no letters all summer. He's convinced his friends don't care about him at all, and he knows the Dursleys don't. Where does this kid find any will to get out of bed in the morning, let alone find small hints of joy at any point in this awful existence? Yet, this kid just got done putting himself into a literal life or death situation. He stood toe-to-toe with a grown wizard with a parasitic murderer growing from the back of his skull. He hung in there until he nearly died and kept hims from retrieving one of the most valuable artifacts on the face of the planet, the Sorcerer's or Philosopher's Stone. Hopefully that's one of the last times I have to make that distinction. An object that can turn any metal into gold and literally provide immortality. Harry saved the world from Voldemort returning with a body, a way to stay alive forever, or another one, but we haven't gotten that far yet, and a never-ending supply of financial resources to aid in his takeover of not only the wizarding world, but ultimately his taking out the Muggles by force. And now he's singing happy birthday to himself in some bushes. This kid's going to put himself in harm's way time and time again before this series is over. And he's truly going to make every sacrifice imaginable for the betterment of others. And there's no way he should ever be that selfless. Not after this upbringing and how awful his circumstances have been. And yet, he is. His empathy, his bravery, his character, and his moral compass are just always pointing in the right direction. Without guidance, without an example to follow, and nearly without a single thing to live for in this moment of the book. Yet, he'll use this experience to better himself and be even more empathetic to others. When so many others would lash out, be angry, hurt, want to hurt people, want to hurt them more than help them, be tempted by darkness, a la Snape, a la Tom Riddle, not Harry. Harry stays the true hero that this story needs. Not a perfect one, and never anyone's favorite character, but the right one. The right hero for the journey that we're on. And we just started the first chapter of just the second book. Let's do some
divination.
Previously known as the Foreshadow segment, it's time to highlight 4 moments in the chapter that foreshadow something to come in the future. Starting with number 1, we get repeated mentions of how Harry is to be quiet in his room and pretend not to exist. Of course, this can only be foreshadowing a whole bunch of noise and nonsense to come. And oh, will it ever. And very, very soon. Number 2, he mentions how his friends forgot his birthday and that he hasn't gotten any letters this summer. This isn't foreshadowing that they forgot him and he's not going to have friends at school anymore. It's foreshadowing that someone has been keeping those from him. Speaking of someone, number 3, the giant eyes in the bush. This is a double dose of foreshadowing. Not only is it dropping the hint that someone or something is about to enter our story, but it's also a nod to our next book when Harry sees Sirius in dog form checking in on him. If I'm not mistaken, that too is some eyes in the bushes type of situation. And number 4, the pudding mention on the top of the fridge. It seems like a silly thing to include, and like it's just rubbing in the fact that Harry isn't being fed properly. But of course, it's actually being mentioned here because it's about to be a big mess and a big deal and a big problem for the hero of our story. Now, let's give away some
House points.
Instead of the game ball and the red card for single characters this season, we're going to give and take house points. In true Hogwarts fashion, it's going to be completely subjective, no oversight, and fully at my discretion. This week, I'm giving house points to Harry, of course. He's getting 10 points for simply dealing with these people and for the moment of levity where he pretends to set Bush on fire. I like it when he screws with Dudley's head, because I don't like Dudley. Now, I'm taking house points away from Vernon Dursley, who's losing 30 points for being a giant abusive waste of space. For Dudley, I'm going to be taking away 15 points for being a slightly smaller abusive waste of space. And Petunia Dursley, I'm taking away 50 points for trying to physically abuse him with a frying pan and for feeding him bread and cheese as his dinner. If he didn't need her blood connection to his mother for the sacrifice and the protection, she could literally accidentally fall on an ice pick and I'd be good with it. Sorry. I'll have a nerdy spreadsheet of some sort to keep track of all of these points, and I will tally them up for the end of the season Binge Awards. Before we go, I still also have to acknowledge the moments in the episode that were utterly
Ridiculous.
Previously known as the Fumble Award, it's not an episode of the Binge if we don't call out what didn't make any sense. Starting with, well, this whole damn chapter. It's ridiculous. I hate it. I hate this family. I hate the planning for the dinner. I hate the angry outbursts. I hate the blatant abuse. I hate all of it, with the exception of the fake bushfire taunts. In reality, if this was going on in some suburban neighborhood, someone would see the flying frying pans or how shitty this boy's being treated, and children's services or whatever equivalent exists would definitely have taken this kid away from this hellhole that he lives in. We're supposed to believe that none of this kid's teachers growing up, parents of other kids, neighbors, nobody has noticed that the kid who's completely malnourished and his clothes don't fit and is being bullied by the same kid that he lives with, who's the literal opposite of those things that I mentioned. Nobody's noticed this. No one. Sure. But it makes us feel bad for him, so it does its job. Whatever. This chapter can fuck right off, as far as I'm concerned. Probably won't even edit that out. And with that happy note, we've reached the end of this episode of The Binge. As always, shout out to producer Jack, who I work like a dog. Remember to follow and subscribe to the show. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other pod players. If you want to support some of the non-major platforms, consider trying Good Pods or maybe Podchaser or something. If you're new, welcome. If you've been here from the beginning, I hope that you've enjoyed the new format. I'm also lining up more guests for this season, and I'm excited, super excited to share more on that coming up. If you're reading along, next episode, we're going to be covering Chapter 2 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Dobby's Warning, and I can promise you, that while that chapter is plenty problematic, I like it so much better than this one that we just dealt with. So I hope that you will still join for that episode. I'll see you next time on the Belated Binge podcast. Remember, boy, one sound. Harry crossed his bedroom on tiptoe, slipped inside, closed the door, and turned to collapse on his bed. The trouble was, there was already someone sitting on it.